What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, change of plans. As you can tell, there's not three of us. There's two of us, but that's okay. Jacob had to go and do lawyer things and keep people out of jail, which we always respect, but no worries, no concerns here, because I, Thomas Tipple, and Ryan Heath joining me today. No Lucas as well on his honeymoon, so shout out Lucas when you hear this on the flight back. Shout out to you. Hope you're having a great time. We decided, Ryan and I, we are going to give you everything that you need to draft for upside. We have been giving you players we like to draft, players that we like at ADP. We have been giving you trade targets, players to trade away, which Ryan and I are definitely going to discuss, because with today's news, look, generally we're not a news show, but obviously the Nico news is something that is important to us, as it's something that we touched on last week, and I am prepared to stand up for my stance. And I think the Dynasty community is already making my argument for me, which I love and appreciate. I, of course, am your host with the most time on his hands. I am Thomas Tipple, and my fun fact of the day is that we have crossed the 7K threshold for subscribers on the Fantasy Points YouTube channel, and we want nothing more than to continue and grow with all of you. So shout out to you all. I just wanted to point that out. You guys are great. We have an amazing fan base, and it's just continuously growing. So that's my fun fact of the day.
Hey, yeah, I as soon as I see it's just the two of us on the screen, I'm like, oh, I have half the amount of time to think of a fun fact. My fun fact is that it is insanely hot in my apartment right now. This is second podcast of the night. I blasted the AC for about 20 minutes in between. You're welcome for not doing it during the podcast. I don't want to do that to all your ears. But yeah, I guess that's my fun fact is you can just watch the sweat slowly form on my forehead the further we get into this show.
You're a better man than me, because I would have been absolutely fun facting who I podcasted with, considering who you went on the mic with. I'm not sure if we're waiting for it to drop or not, but for anyone listening, it's a kind of a big deal. So I'm not going to make Ryan's face turn too red when discussing it, but it'll be something that everyone here is going to want to check out 100%. Of course, if you haven't already, you're going to want to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment on the video. It really helps us in that algorithm. Look, we have some links to other videos for you that we think relate to this in the comments. So when you're done this, you can just click that, head on to the next one, leave a comment on that, and so on and so forth. We love and appreciate every single one of you. Tons of questions. Now, today, we are going to try to hard out this at like an hour 10, because Ryan's a megastar and has another podcast to do. So if we don't get to all of the questions, we apologize, but we really think that the content being provided within this episode is going to help you take your startup to the next level and give you some ideas to work with within your leagues. With that being said, Ryan, why don't we walk through the Nico Collins news and why you are ready for your DMs to blow up for me the minute it happened, and let's discuss what's going on here.
Yeah, so I mean, anytime I get that notification of something happening in the NFL that I expected to happen, that I argued on this very show was very likely to happen not even 2 weeks ago, I know that Thomas is going to be in my DMs, absolutely coping about it. The spin is on. He's about to tell you that the Dynasty community is going to steam Nico Collins up way too far in startup drafts off of this news. Now that we know Collins is locked in with CJ Stroud for through 2027. So, I mean, that sounds pretty good to me. That sounds like a top 12 Dynasty wide receiver to me. Look, Nico Collins, top 5 in every rate stat we care about, yards per out run, first downs per out run, pretty much all of them. He is the most complete receiver on this Texans team. He is not 170 pounds like Tank Dell is. That's awesome. He's where we want him to be in the wide receiver age curves, as opposed to Stephon Diggs, who is where we do not want him to be. I understand why people are going to have a preference for Nico Collins here. I will concede maybe he's not going to significantly outscore all of those other Texans wide receivers in redraft this year. But in terms of his long-term value, us being able to project him over the next 4 years for this type of production, I feel really good about that. I don't feel good at all about that with Stephon Diggs. And even with Tank Dell, I have some questions. So I am all about it. I still clearly prefer Nico Collins in this wide receiver core. And Thomas is going to probably like make up an ADP or something to argue against that. So the floor is over to you.
Make up an ADP. So if you haven't heard, it's 3 years, 72 million. I believe there's 52 million in guarantees. It's 17.4 or 17.3 guaranteed per year. I'll be very interested to see if this is a legitimate 3-year extension or if it is a 2-year extension with some dead money, Fugazi contract type deal. I mean, Houston had the money to extend him, so I get extending him. My argument was not that they shouldn't extend him, or it was more, I don't know if they will, and maybe he won't. But what I do know is that I've already seen from very smart dynasty players, people across the industry already, saying that Nico Collins is going to go from my wide receiver 16 or 17. He's top 12 now. Well, he should have been top 12 already. Right? Like Ryan said, this was a predictable contract extension. He should have already been there. My argument is that we're moving somebody up. So then if you look at where he is right now, courtesy of Dynasty Data Lab, we're sitting here and looking at Nico Collins, wide receiver 18. That's obviously going to change now, 100%. He's going to go above Devonta Smith and Michael Pittman. I agree. Jalen Waddle, sure, won't have an argument. Roma Dunze, sure, don't really have too much of an argument. Brandon Ayuk, sure. This 4th round is going to change, where instead of him going in the late 4, he's probably going to go into the early 4, which at the end of the day, I can't hate too much. This is where I'll disagree, though. If we're moving Nico so far up, like we're 100% he's the top dog, he's getting all that production, then wider, like for Tank Dell, who is wide receiver 22 in the 5th round, are we moving him down now? Does he stay the same? And then why, for a player who I think scored eerily similar to Nico Collins in his rookie year in points per game and expected points per game, and they weren't too far apart in almost every major category when they were healthy and played games at the same time on the same field. And then we expect some CJ Stroud regression because we have to. His season was so unbelievable in the turnover and his insane efficiency to the point where Noah Brown was in some very much so profitable DFS lineups multiple times last year before he had gotten hurt. And we add the current wide receiver 36 and Stephon Diggs, who might be dust. Sure. Does Joe Brady suck at targeting guys open and creating an offense? Sure. So there are 2 things there for that. He's also wide receiver 36. So my argument comes in, if we are moving Nico that high, now wide receiver 18 to wide receiver 12 is a significant draft capital difference in terms of trading for a player. Because when people see that 12 or 13, they clinch up in terms of wanting to let him go. They do. It's just how it operates, right? Look at Brandon Ayuk right now, who's never had a season like Nico Collins had last year, regardless of how he had to do it. And people latch on to Brandon Ayuk as the great hope. So now you're putting Nico there. My argument is, if we expect this offense to be really good, and the argument is that the offense can support multiple wide receivers and all the above, then I personally would rather tier down and collect the pluses that would come on top of a Tank Dell. And even if the pluses are going to be so extreme that it's Nico Collins all the way down to wide receiver 36 currently, and probably going to fall because of how the dynasty community reacts to contracts. Nico got paid, so even though Stephon Diggs' situation hasn't changed at all, he'll probably fall a little bit for seemingly no reason. Why wouldn't you go and get maybe multiple firsts at this point with this kind of hot burning news to tier all the way down to Stephon Diggs? Because right now you can draft we talked about this on a previous show, an insane amount of wide receivers. And I expect Nico Collins to kind of regress to the Brandon Ayuk and Jalen Waddle area. I mean, you can still go and get your DJ Moore, Michael Pittman, DK Metcalf, T. Higgins, et cetera, down that tier. If you're getting multiple firsts or something significant on top, I can't not do that. I love Nico, but he alphaed out when no one else was on the field, which we love, at a hyper efficient rate from CJ Stroud in an offense that's going to get a second look now. There's just a lot there for projecting, but my biggest problem, even though Ryan's going to say that I made up ADP or that none of this is right, before we hit the start button, right? Ryan did say, I'll give you that in terms of the expected points. So if he doesn't say it, I want to let everyone know that he did say that. I just think the pluses are too good to pass up for just tearing down to Chris Godwin or T. Higgins, who could very well get his own bag. And there's just so many options that moving him up for something that, like you said, was so predictable. That's my biggest issue. So if he stays at 18, smash, like Hulk smash. I'll just keep hammering him because I hate that I have to be the guy against Nico, because I was defending Nico before it was cool, even in conversations with our fan here, and I've met him in person. He's a wonderful human, Toronto Dave. Him and I were going at, I was defending Nico before it was cool, like a hipster. I'm stealing D-Bro's job with my hipster reference every show. There has to be one. If we're steaming him up that far for a situation that should have been predicted and his stats didn't change, that's where I think the mistake is in the Dynasty community. I'm not buying now. I'll tell you that much, unless there's somebody out there that thinks like I do, but I'm not buying now. Like the price is too high now. We've already jumped the shark minutes after it got signed. We immediately went and jumped the shark. So that's what it is. I don't think he's a bad player. That might have been too long of a rant. We might have lost all of our listeners, but you can leave a comment below or leave a rate on the podcast wherever you're listening to tell me that I'm insane. Doesn't matter. Tell at Fantasy PTS on X, tell them to fire me. I don't know what it's going to be, but I just think he's about to become massively mispriced. But I will say I will draft him over every single one of the running backs that gets drafted, not named Gibbs, Hall, or Bijan at this point in startups anyway.
I just think he was mispriced already. His price might correct now to be efficient, and that's fine.
That's fair.
So you can say the buy window is closed, and look, I'll say it again, even though it's not canon. If I didn't say it when the mics were live, if I said it before, I could moonwalk away from that. But no, I will give it to you live on air. Yes, these three Texans wide receivers should have fairly similar redraft projections this year. But this isn't a redraft show. This is a dynasty show.
Yeah, but we can't say that Dell can't do what he did last year, even as a rookie, even though he's light, right? He's a little light on the weight, right? I think I've got about half of a Tank Dell on him, on my body. He was still incredibly productive.
Yeah, no, I weigh more than Tank Dell, of course. But my point isn't so much can any of these Texans receivers succeed this year. I think all of them can. My thought experiment I want to run right now is it's week 1 or week 2. Let's think about what happens to the dynasty value of each of these Texans wide receivers if they have a season-ending injury in the first few weeks. Nico Collins, takes a short-term hit. He's probably fine. He's locked into a long-term deal. He's the type of player where you can very confidently say, okay, when players get injured during the season in Dynasty, they have a fall in value. It almost always comes back to about where it was beforehand. If this is a player whose role we feel confident in for the next few seasons sustaining, right? If Tank Dell has a season-ending injury this year, he's injury prone and he's tiny and he can't stay healthy and nobody wants him. And if Stephon Diggs has a season-ending injury this year, he's old, he's washed, he's done, he's never coming back. So the value insulation is what Nico Collins offers. I understand if you're looking at your roster and you're saying, I want to take some lower cost swings at some weekly upside, sure, I'll take Tank Dell and the plus. Totally understand that line of thinking. But if you want to build a dynasty roster that can weather some injuries where you're not going to be completely screwed if your plan you put together for 2024 doesn't perfectly work out, and it very rarely does, then I understand why Nico Collins should be a top 12 dynasty wide receiver because he offers that long-term safety. And this is especially important in, like we say, know your league on this show all the time.
Yeah.
If you're in a league that is not super liquid, that doesn't have a bunch of Thomas Tipples in here that are trying to tear down to Tank Dell and add a plus or whatever it is, and they just, if your league mates aren't going to be into Tank Dell once he's injury prone, that's something to consider, is all I'm saying.
Sure. Now, I will say that there's also another side of this too, where if you are sitting there looking at a Drake London, Chris Olave type player and you think, well, I'll just tear down. Now I'm tearing down the Nico Collins. So there is a part where I'm willing to just continue to do that. I want to get that out of the way so that when Nico Collins blows up again, people are like, no, you shit on him. You don't get to like him. No, I do like him as a player. Again, I want to make it very clear. You're saying exactly what I'm saying in terms of he was already mispriced, so you were buying him at that price, right? But now I think the general consensus of him being moved up is where, again, my problem therein lies. And then the points per game to expected. I agree. Like 3 years, I love that he's locked in. 3 years is a long time in Dynasty to be projecting ahead. OC can be gone. CJ Stroud can get hurt. Something like there's a lot of variables to deal with in Dynasty in 3 years. That's why I always believe there is no safety outside of like the top 3 at every position. Because I don't believe there is. Even in quarterbacks, right? You got we talk about this a lot. Herbert was a top 3-4 pick a couple years ago. Now he's in the second round, right? We talk about Dak being a 201 to a first round pick last year, third round, after putting up insane numbers, et cetera.
Yeah,
just
that one
constantly
doesn't make sense though.
Yeah, no, I agree. But now we have CJ Stroud going at 3, right? Or Lamar Jackson was a late 1, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like there is no true safety in this game. So to project 3 years ahead is a little too much for me, but overall, I think we're going to end up in the same place. I think he belongs where he's about to go, but there's just other, like I would just rather get whatever I can. And when I say plus, people go, what do you mean by plus? Second round picks, 2 second round picks, some running backs if you need the help, extending your lineup, adding liquidity where it's possible. Because I think moving from guys like, I think he has similar game-breaking upside to like a Jalen Waddle, who we talked about last week.
Yeah. Oh,
awesome.
I'm taking
I'll
Waddle
tier
over Collins. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting because Waddle's wide receiver 15. So that's like,
that's
again,
also inefficient.
That's where I think the market is your best friend, because if that's what you're playing, then like I do, all I do is play the market. People ask me how I play the game. All my trades, I look at the market. I structure everything around the market. That's just how I take in fantasy, and that's how I'll view it. But if I have the opportunity, I'll say, because again, you just said Waddle's same. If I can just tier to Ayuk, Waddle, Pittman, some of these other guys, I'm not going to need that much. Because like you said, maybe something doesn't go right. Now you have more liquid assets. And I will also say this. I also think that really active managers that are comfortable trading a lot should be applying this strategy, even in a startup. Because if you are not active enough and don't have I won't say wherewithal, but the trade stamina, if you would, to be active enough to make up for something like this, then I would just say take Collins and call it a day. And we're going to get into how to do drafts, because there was a question asked in the Discord that I really want to hit. So I think that sums it up right. I think we both agree that he's probably going to be where I think he is, but it's moving him enough at a mass rate to affect the micro enough for me to tear out, and same with drafts. So I think you're right. Your buy window has probably shut Your sell window has opened. And we always say there is no such thing as a buy low or a sell high. That doesn't exist. But opening windows and closing windows does exist. So I think those are gone. This is your time to get off and get more liquidity, especially if you're holding on like a rebuilder, right? That's not totally ready to go. If you just want to cash out and get a ton of high level assets, you can still do that as well. Also would be looking in if somebody has like one of them high tier running backs that win you fantasy leagues. If you can just throw a Nico at them and add just a little bit to go and tier up to one of those high end running backs, I would also use this opportunity to jump in and do that as well. Lots of different options. Didn't expect to go almost 20 minutes on Nico Collins, but there we go. We did it. We're going to take our first break. When we come back, we are going to talk about positional drafting of upside, some players that you are going to want to take, maybe some players that you are going to want to avoid, and how to apply Ryan Heath's view on drafting for upside when we come back after this break. Okay, I am as excited for this as I was to hear the news of Angel Hernandez retiring. So now that I have one of the greatest things to ever happen in my life happen, if you're a baseball fan, you'll completely understand that. I'm ready to finally be taken to the next level in my draft. See, Ryan, you and I have discussed at length. You play this game for maximum upside. And as much as I never wanted to admit it, I kind of play for safety across my roster. I always thought I was an upside guy. Then you showed up and completely changed my life and how I play fantasy, and admitting that to myself. So let's talk about really what drafting for upside is, because a lot of people just assume it's drafting the most points. It is not. It is deeper than that. You wrote a phenomenal article about this. What is drafting for upside, and how can people apply it?
Yeah. So kind of the first thing you need to understand about fantasy football, this especially applies to redraft, but also to dynasty, is only a handful of players every single year actually make a material difference to your odds of winning a title. So your goal every single year, including in dynasty, should be, I want to win a title. Or if you're a rebuilder in dynasty, it's, I want to maximize my odds of winning a title in future seasons, right? It always comes back to, I want to finish first place in my league this year or at some point in the future. And knowing that there were only 6 or 7 players that really caused you to have a material increase in your title odds last year. So Christian McCaffrey was the biggest one. There were about 5 or 6 wide receivers, your CeeDee Lambs, your Puka Nakuas, who also fell into this category. And then you have like kind of your next tier of running backs who ended up running really hot, like your Raheem Mosterts, your Travis Etienne's actually showed up just based on his early season performance, and your Alvin Kamara's. So those are just some names to throw at you from 2023. But you got to understand, if you have 2 or 3 of those guys on your team, it almost doesn't matter what the rest of your roster looks like, because very few other players are scoring very far above replacement every single week. So when you add all of that up into a 17-game season, it shouldn't be your goal to say, I want as many players on my roster who are going to average 14 fantasy points per game as I can possibly get, and I don't want to miss on anybody. Your goal should be, I want as many possible shots at that 18 plus fantasy points per game player, because as I said, even in Dynasty, there is a replacement level with these deep benches. You can probably get 10 to 11 fantasy points per game pretty easily into your flex spot if you need to, right? Almost no matter what happens to your team, unless it's like a real big teardown rebuild where you're already not optimizing for this year. So yeah, that's kind of the thesis of drafting for upside, is just maximize your chances of hitting on the handful of players that matter every single season. is kind of similar in best ball as well, although downside and floor do matter much more in best ball. But yeah, just overall, my approach to fantasy football is informed by that.
Yeah, it's important. Like you said, it's not just about scoring points. You still have to get to the end game, right? So a lot of the drafting for upside, a lot of people assume, it's just early. No, a lot of it is late. You want to be drafting for the most upside you can late. This is why I hammer ambiguous quarterbacks. This is why we always talk about hammering ambiguous sophomore or rookie running backs. This is why Nico Collins was a great buy last year, because John Mechie was the wide receiver going drafted ahead of both Collins and Tank Dell this time last year. It was John Mechie. So we could probably blame Scott Barrett for that, for juicing him up every chance that he got. But you always want to buy the ambiguity. That's, to me, where the upside is. So with that, let's talk about some players you like when using this process. Let's give the people an opportunity to target these guys, even though if you're in drafts with us, this has already happened to me, where people just start taking them in front of me, and it really hurts my feelings. So I need you guys to stop that and let me have some of my favorite players. Please, we're going to do this a little bit position by position and really pan this out. There are a couple guys that you like and a couple guys that you like to avoid. So let me ask you, Ryan Heath, the GOAT, which year one or year two running backs have undervalued breakout potential? I have one that I want to talk about, so hopefully you don't hit him.
Okay. Yeah, I'll play the game of whack-a-mole and hope I pick the guy that you don't. I can give you two, and I'll only quickly touch on the first one because he is going higher. It's not like a super easy thing to get him in a startup or to get people to trade him to you in Dynasty or whatever. But I would like to acquire Achane right now if I can. Is that who? Did I lose whack-a-mole?
No.
Or I won whack-a-mole, right? I hit the mole? Or
no, we're still playing whack-a-mole with
okay.
Achane.
Okay, cool. So yeah, Achane, most efficient rookie season against his weighted opportunity of any running back over the past decade. Rookie year, Alvin Kamara was the only one who came close. If you've been around a while in the fantasy industry, you might remember after Alvin Kamara's rookie year, the constant screaming from the rafters, from all the spreadsheet bros, I can say this because I am a spreadsheet bro, the spreadsheet regression bros were constantly saying Alvin Kamara just had unsustainable efficiency as a rookie. He didn't get really a full workload. He was super efficient on limited touches, but he is going to regress in terms of efficiency. He just can't score this many touchdowns. He can't continue breaking off this many big plays, and he's going to regress, and you're an idiot if you draft him at cost. So it might sound a little bit familiar with everything I just said, as far as how people are feeling about Achane this year, or at least a significant portion of the naysayers. Yes, Achane, he did not command a lot of volume last year. He wasn't even the starting running back for most of the weeks that he entered with himself and Mostert healthy. But look, running backs who are as efficient as Achane was as a rookie, who were drafted on day one or day two, almost always see an increase in workload in year two. This aligns with all of my age curves research from last offseason. Year two running backs very frequently get more opportunity and break out. And guess what? It's exactly what happened with Alvin Kamara, and it's what I expect to happen with Achane. Yes, Achane is the smallest and lightest running back that we have seen kind of do this. So I understand we're in a little bit of uncharted territory, significantly lighter than Alvin Kamara. But he has been a track athlete his entire life, a very accomplished track athlete, just kind of looking down his results page. I know nothing about track and field, but it all looked pretty impressive to me. There were a lot of wins on the page that Scott Barrett linked to me. Thank you, Scott. So I'm assuming he was a pretty good in track. And this offseason, he has been able to bulk up really for the first time. Is he on a scale now at the NFL Combine? Do we know exactly how much he weighs and what his BMI is now? No. But if I can have any reason to dismiss the weight concern for the most efficient rookie running back of all time, I'm going to do that. I'm sorry. So yeah, give me Devon Achane in Dynasty, like RB7 ADP or something like that. I will take him, let's see, over Jonathan Taylor. I want him. I certainly want him over Kyron Williams. I certainly want him over Travis Etienne. I just named off 3 players who, while
he's your four. Like really, when you take those names out, you've got Bijan, Hall, Gibbs, and then there's McCaffrey and then Achane. So he's either your 4 or 5 at this point.
Yeah, no, he's a top 5 dynasty running back for me. Absolutely. Yeah. And yes, I understand Jonathan Taylor, Kyron Williams, those, and even Travis Etienne for a little while. Those are guys that have carried a really big workload at different points in their career. But we have plenty of reason to think that none of those 3 will do so this year. Kyron Williams already injured, has competition from Blake Corum. Jonathan Taylor had a really big workload as a sophomore, got injured. The Colts didn't want to give him a big workload from then on. That was what we saw all of last year. I understand that so it's kind of interesting with Taylor because they haven't invested at all in their RB2 position. That's what I was going to say. Yeah. Yeah. So if I'm capitulating towards any of those 3, it is Taylor. He's probably my RB6. Don't whatever you do, don't go on fantasypoints.com and check my rankings against the things I say on the show, because that's super embarrassing if I say something that goes against what
you don't want to Jacob you don't want to Jacob and have me call you a fraud for 2 minutes on the podcast.
Exactly. Yeah. So whatever you do, don't go do that and then comment it in the comments and call me out. Definitely, please do not do that.
Yeah, definitely don't comment about Ryan being an absolute fraud in his rankings right now in the video comment section. We definitely don't want that.
Wouldn't want that at all.
No, terrible.
So yeah, Achane, clearly my draft for upside guy early in drafts this year. Aside from him, I want Tajay Spears right now. He, for some reason, has a very similar ADP to Tony Pollard, who is several years older. Tony Pollard, on the complete other side of the Devon Achane spectrum, just had one of the least efficient seasons against weighted opportunity that we've seen in the last decade. Top 5, I believe. Only really outdone by Josh Jacobs last year in terms of inefficiency. When a player that is getting older becomes incredibly inefficient, I get really worried. And when he is sharing a backfield with a second-year running back who, as I said, have much higher breakout odds than any other age, I really want to lean into Tajay Spears because I think there's a very good chance that Tony Pollard just kind of fails this year. And if that happens, then Spears benefits. We know they trust him in the passing game. He was, I believe, the RB4, RB5 just in target share last year. Mm-hmm. So yeah, has the skill set that we look for in a fantasy running back. You can get him kind of in those weird mid rounds of a startup where no one really wants to draft a running back anyway. So Spears is a priority target for me in all formats this year.
Yeah, I find it interesting that over the last month, they pretty much go back to back. You have Pollard, who, as you laid out beautifully, was horrendously inefficient, and you have Spears, 2 guys that have the similar workload. Just one wasn't horrendously inefficient, and one is in that beautiful sophomore breakout spot. So from what I've seen, Spears has gone before Pollard, but for the most part, like you said, they're careening around that 8 to 10 round mark, which you should already have your 5 to 7 wide receivers by then anyway. So unless you're a true sicko like me, here's the one thing I might counter you on for Pollard, something that was brought to my attention. Pollard's first half and second half were completely different. So Pollard was significantly better. If he was not amazing, but he was significantly better as he was coming back from injury. So is that enough to dampen the opinion or the stance, or to kind of make you lean more 50-50 there? Should, say, Spears starts going 2, 3, 4 rounds above Pollard, would you come back down maybe to more Pollard? Would he become a don't touch zone? Because, like I said, there are people that really do believe in that second half being different enough to really keep these guys even. If there is a significant change based on Pollard's total lack of ability last year on the overall scale, it's just a testament to how fucking horrible his first half was. Is that enough for you to kind of, okay, I've had enough of this, if there is like a significant jump up from Spears to Pollard?
I mean, not really. Like, okay. Yes, I understand that Pollard himself was coming out after the season and saying, yeah, I wasn't feeling really like myself until like week 10 or week 11 or somewhere around there. He still gave you almost nothing down the stretch of the season. He had like a really good November, like weeks 11 through 14. He was a top 12 running back in 3 out of 4 weeks. But I mean, was outside the top 30 weeks 15 through 17 in the playoffs. I think he just kind of hit some slightly better touchdown luck, but he was also losing red zone work as the year went on, which is not a great sign either. Also, the Cowboys not re-signing him is not a great sign for an older player. So as I laid out in my article about how free agency is a scam, which you can find on fantasypoints.com. So yeah, I just have a lot of issues against Pollard built up. It's going to be pretty hard to change my stance on this one, I think.
Okay, that's fair. I just had to ask in terms of, what if Spears takes off? Does it kind of change how much you're willing to double down on it? For me, being the type of person I am, I mean, if we end up getting like a 2-round gap, that I'm gonna take whoever's cheaper, because I can't help myself. I have a problem, and that's why you're here. That's why we work so well together, because you're here to keep me grounded, Ryan, and that's really important. For me, there's one player you did not win whack-a-mole.
Wow.
So there is a player that I actually like that is still considerably cheap, considering the offense is quite literally built for backs like him. Jaleel McLaughlin is somebody that I am very much into. It's always been the Samaje P line on this podcast. Jacob came up with the P line. We've stuck with the P line. That P line has moved. I don't know what kind of nickname we're going to get for the Jaleel line, but I have been anti Javonte Williams. Well, look, if you missed the massive rant I had against Jacob on this topic, you can find that video. You can go and watch that episode where we discussed him. I was out on him at RB15 prices. I am still out on him at his current price, which has started to decline all the way to RB21. There's just other guys I prefer there, like Kamara, Mondre. There's just some other guys that I prefer in that range for a guy who is #slow, right? Yes, he can make some people miss, and he can catch the ball well enough. Doesn't do a lot with those receptions, which I think is important. Jaleel, though, is a very interesting case of very explosive, very athletic, definitely shined at points, to the point he did not. He had the same touchdown rate. All these running backs. Javonte Williams was really bad at the goal line last year, like to an embarrassing level. But the missed tackles forced per attempt, 0.29, really like that. That's something that I definitely look at. He had half the carries, right? So obviously there's some work to do. Half the carries in a zone concept, I should say. The man gap concept was completely leaned, obviously more to one side than the other. But he is the type of player that is incredibly explosive. And what I really like from him, as I pull up the next part of my discussion, because I'm a professional, he can catch passes. He had only 2 fewer targets. Samaje P. Ryan had only 2 fewer targets I am expecting somebody like Jaleel to get on the field more than Samaje Perine, right? If you are heading into your second season, you'll look at a player like Samaje, who has definitely been aging, definitely less efficient. Jaleel to break out, he's going to have to eat into Perine's touches, and I think he will. Jaleel, who did not start off the year as a massive target or massive producer in the offense, still ended up with 36 targets, which I think is pretty good. He had 31 receptions. He had a high designed play rate. He had a high yards per target. He had a pretty high yards per route run, second only to Samaje Perine. Obviously, there's a little bit of projection here in terms of needing to beat out a veteran NFL running back, which is not easy. He is the most athletic running back on that offense. I do not think it is at all close. This is an offense that is designed to check it down to running backs at an alarming rate. Now they have a rookie quarterback. This is a Sean Payton offense. If there's somebody in that offense that I think can truly break out into position, I don't think it's Javonte sans some touchdown magic. And considering Jaleel is RB 65, if you tell me that you can't afford him, man, that says something to me. Brian Ford, estimate is Perine. Perine going to get cut. I also think that he's going to get cut. I just don't think that Estime and Watson are it in terms of that offense. I think Jaleel is still the most explosive player within that offense, and he's definitely one of the cheapest in that offense. I know people like Watson. He's like a nice, fun post-rookie waiver ad, right? He's kind of like a Cody Schrader in terms of like where people are taking him. He's another fine bet. It's true. But in terms of a good pass catcher who is insanely explosive in this offense for check down roles, I love it. I love it. Again, RB 65. So it's not exactly like I'm really reaching too far here to get him, but I really like him. What's your thoughts on Jaleel?
Yeah, I love it too. I wrote him up earlier this offseason based on him being, top 5 in missed tackles forced per touch. Super explosive player, a guy that you can, okay, so you can find an unhinged Sean Payton quote for almost anybody on the roster. So I'm not saying this necessarily holds that much weight. And he has called so many players like his Joker that he wants them to play the Joker role throughout his entire coaching career, and it's been awesome for like 3 of them. But late last year, he was hyping up Jaleel a ton in the media, saying that he could play the Joker role next year. And there is, as you said, there is real upside in this backfield, especially from a pass catching perspective. I remember Jacob made fun of me on the draft live stream for this stat, but in the final 4 minutes of each half, Samaje Perine, I think, was top 2 in target share just within those minutes of every NFL game. So, the Broncos throw to running backs a ton. We should expect that to continue this year. McLaughlin hadn't caught a ton of passes in college, but it seems like they like him in that role. He certainly has a chance to win it, and I can see a world where that is a usable fantasy asset. And it is. Look, is Jaleel McLaughlin ever going to be, he's on 30% of championship and playoff rosters? No. But in terms of a player that can help you for free, I'll take that. Absolutely.
Right. No, I agree. Whisper that I love this from Meatwad. What a name. Whisper that sweet Jaleel propaganda into my ear. Well, I won't whisper, but I will tell you that I love that name. That's one of my favorites. JJFN says Bo Nix was captain check down as well. Right. He does still have to pass Perine, but like Brian mentioned, Perine's likely a cut candidate for me. If he does stay on that roster, it's going to change his opinion to me like 100%. But at the same time, he should be able to get past Samaje Perine. JJFN says, I don't listen to coaches at all. You should be going and watching the Coach Speak Index, because that dude cuts through the bullshit that coaches like to put out in the world. He really cuts through it, cuts to the brass tacks. We're going to take one more break. When we come back, we're going to hit wide receivers. There's not a lot about tight ends because I don't want to argue about Sam Laporta for another 7.5 hours. So we're not going to do too much on tight ends, but we are going to hit some wide receivers. And then at the end of this all, we're going to get some players to avoid as we talk through the question, if we can get to it. If not, that is a great question for next week, Brian. So sit tight. When we come back, we're going to do wide receivers and tight ends. Okay, here we go. Let's talk about more wide receivers. I feel like you and I have just been discussing wide receivers now for 3 or 4 weeks, but it is the most congested position in fantasy, right? Anywhere from wide receiver like 16 to 30 feels like it's pretty tight in terms of expected production. So let's talk about it. Wide receivers, which year 2 or year 3 wide receivers have undervalued breakout potential?
Yeah. So, I mean, just looking at ADP, if we're going undervalued, I think the incredibly obvious one is Rashee Rice. So look, I understand we don't know what's going on with the legal stuff. Some of the charges got dropped. The whole camera in the nightclub thing got dropped, I believe. The league is still likely to discipline him. But look, Rashee Rice was a wide receiver 1 down the stretch last season. As soon as he was running over a 60% route share in that offense, he was a fantasy wide receiver 1. He, yes, was in kind of that shorter, low ADOT role for a lot of the year. He succeeded in it. Top 10 in yards per out run, first downs per out run, all the nerdy stats looked amazing. Even when he was split out wide, he was effective in all of those rate stats. It's pretty hard to look at Rashee Rice's season as a rookie and poke very many holes in it. And you add in that he plays with Patrick Mahomes. Yes, he might get suspended for 6 games, but look, let's be real. Andy Reid has never cared about character concerns on his team unless there's a video. I don't want to get too controversial here tonight, but that's generally how things seem to go on the Chiefs. So I am all about buying up the Rashee Rice for the 2nd round rookie pick type of prices. Also love him in redraft this year. I think as far as undervalued year 2 potential breakout wide receivers, he's got to be at the top of the list. I don't know. I will say though, I think especially like in the bubble of the Dynasty community and all the like hardcore Twitter sicko leagues, I do think there's a lot of younger like year 2 wide receivers who are kind of being steamed up just for the fact that they're year 2 wide receivers. I don't want to just say that that's because of me or give myself credit of that, because that's absolutely not true. But it's weird when you write about something and you feel like you see that everyone else is thinking change on it at the same time.
Yep.
But yeah, so for example, I don't see it with guys like Jordan Addison, like Zay Flowers, even Jaden Reed. Like I have serious questions about all of those guys' ability to take the next step in terms of being anywhere close to a fantasy wide receiver 1. With Rashee Rice, we already saw it for a decent amount of time. I think just in terms of roles, he's not really threatened by a Marquise Brown or a Xavier Worthy. I think the Chiefs are likely to try to use both of those players in more like deep field stretching roles. That was kind of what they were lacking last year. How we can argue about how successful Xavier Worthy is going to be at that. But yeah, I think whenever Rice is on the field, he has that PPR scam type of role locked down. And even if he misses the first 6 weeks of the season, his dynasty value is going to completely recover by week 8. So it's hard for me to care that much.
Right. We're talking about a guy averaged 16 points per game down the stretch. Like as a rookie, that's pretty good. The more he got on the field, that offense started to go. And that's pretty obvious. I think you're right we can sit here and argue about Worthy to wear blue in the face. I'm still not 100% sure him being a bad deep ball tracker was on Quinn Ewers or on him. They were both kind of ass at their respected jobs in that regard last year in college and profiles and all that stuff. I'm not concerned about Marquise Brown. Same thing as you're saying. This is a guy that if he plays 17 games, I'm going to be 7 feet tall. It just doesn't happen and probably never will happen. He does have some stretches, like you said, but I'm not entirely concerned about it in terms of skill set, etc. I think this offense is going to be annoying, in my opinion, but I think you're right. I drafted him at 7-3 in my most recent startup, so I'm still buying. There is a bit of a quote dip there. It'll be interesting. I know, Brian, you said, am I too biased against the Pickens hype? I mean, I don't think there's such a thing. I mean, any plays outside of egregious pass interference or completely blown zone coverages, and George Pickens struggles. So there is that. As much as every single broadcaster that calls those games sit there and questions why they're not getting the ball to Pickens, the broadcasters are the worst for spreading Pickens propaganda. And I understand that there are people out there that think that Pickens has gotten an upgrade from quarterback to OC. You can polish a turd, you can wash a turd, but when you eat a turd, you're still eating a giant piece of shit. So keep that in mind. Not that he's playing a piece of shit, but his fantasy production is no bueno. I want to get that point out across. George, if you're watching, please don't stare at me like you did the TV on draft night. Like, just don't do that. That would make me uncomfortable. Incredibly uncomfortable. So let's get to the second player that you had. Another offense that I think is going to be a little bit annoying, but this has been kind of one of the driving forces to my just give me who's cheaper. This has kind of been the catalyst of that. I was not high on him before listening to yourself. You've absolutely clued me in on this guy. So let's clue the rest of the people in.
Yeah, I can only assume you're talking about Dontavian Wicks. So we'll go into the Dontavian Wicks stuff. So look, top 15 in first downs per route run as a rookie, which is kind of unbelievable. I understand that he only ran over a 50% route share. I did see that one catch on primetime that George Pickens had. That was a stick catch. Anyway, Dontavian Wicks, 7 games last season with over a 50% route share. In those games, he averaged just over like 37 receiving yards per game, 9 fantasy points per game. Sounds mediocre. That was better than Jackson Smith and Jigba last year. So is producing like a mediocre first round pick as a day 3 player in a admittedly part-time role that only became full-time when Christian Watson was off the field. But look, yeah, that was some crazy guy that just went by outside my window. I'm sure you can
insane
hear that.
Fast.
Yeah,
he's cruising.
Know. Yeah, that guy's having fun, I hope. Anyway, back to Dontavian Wicks. My thing with him is, look, a rookie wide receiver steps on the field, goes and wins on the outside, and produces first downs at a top 15 rate among all wide receivers. That better than Tank Dell, if you want some comparison. So I am into Dontavian Wicks as the cheapest option in this very confusing Packers receiving core. Do I think he just walks over and takes Romeo Dobbs' job? Not necessarily. Could Christian Watson pull another hamstring? I absolutely hope not. I have even more Christian Watson, and we'll have bigger Christian Watson bags this year probably. But if that happens, that's another potential path for Dontavian Wicks to get on the field and continue just winning. Yeah, so all about Wicks. I will say, compared to 2 months ago when the price was basically nothing, and now it is actually a second round rookie pick, I'm a little less excited to go out and make that trade. I'd say it's become more efficient. It's the same thing with Nico Collins. Okay.
I think he's a fake second. I think he's a fake second round pick evaluation because Malachi Corley, come on. I mean, Jermaine Burton. Yeah. I mean, that's a serious question you have to ask yourself, but like, come on, he should be going ahead of Quentin Johnston. He already had a better rookie year. Like, let's get that out of there. But I think you're right. I think he's kind of around that weird, like Luke. Geez, I cannot talk today. Luke McCaffrey. That's a mouthful. Michael Wilson going around him, Jaleel McLaughlin. Like, I don't think he's full on second round pick value, especially in a startup. Acquiring him, you might get the guy that likes him a little more, but yeah, I mean, he's around that Roman Wilson territory. So you're right.
I'm taking him over all those names very easily, other than Jermaine Burton. So yeah, maybe that's my Twitter bubble take, where I've been having a hard time getting Wicks from his 10 biggest fans. So yeah. Okay, fine. Go out and buy Dontavian Wicks. There you go.
Yeah. We absolutely should be, and make sure to sell him off to Ryan, because he'll be really sad if you don't. So Shadow, I just want to point out before we continue that the jokes about the motorcycle or car, whichever, have been absolutely peak. Somebody,
I don't have the chat up. I need
Meatwad says, "There goes Rushy Rice."
Oh no.
Fantasy Football Factor says that was Romeo Dobbs on his way to the end zone outside of Ryan's window for like the one time that might happen this year. Toronto Dave said that was actually just Wicks running by. So shout out. JJFN says that guy was listening to this podcast and heard the Pickens bit. He wasn't too happy. Amazing. You guys are unrivaled in your comedic approach. That's so good. JJFN also says, Ryan, you are solely responsible for Wick's price going up.
Stop telling me that. I don't need that big of like a head. I know I don't have this influence over the market that that people try to convince me I do. There's no possible way that that's true. I'm sorry. Everyone is hyping up Dontavian Wicks. He has become I won't say kid. Yeah, he really has. And it's not just like the stat nerds like me. It's the film people too, as I was just told on the previous podcast I was on, which I'm super hyping up and teasing right now. I'm not going to say who it was or where it was or what was going on there. But yeah, at Twitter at @RyanJ_Heath, you'll see it tomorrow on your feed probably.
No, absolutely. I think there was one I'm avoiding, and his name is Jaden Reed. I know that we're going to give some players to people to avoid. His price being right beside Mike Evans and Stephon Diggs and Keon Coleman. To me, I'm willing to take the cheaper bet in an offense that's probably going to be annoying. So there we go. There's a player that I am avoiding to it. One more break. Then we're going to touch on a tight end or two. It's very hard to find them at this point. And then we're going to try to answer this question. We've only got 14 minutes. So we're going to try to get in and out with the tight ends, and then maybe tease the question for next week. Because Ryan, I don't know if you know this or not, but you're also coming back next week. So sit tight. Last break. And then we're going to finish strong here on Dynasty Points. Sit tight. So Ryan, I say on to you the same thing I've been saying for every position group here, except we haven't mentioned quarterbacks. Maybe instead of the last question, I'll get a quarterback or two that you think has that upside potential. They don't have to be a rookie or a sophomore. That's a very specific point. But what tight end do you think has an undervalued breakout potential right now?
Sure. So year 2 tight ends, just want to emphasize this, are the biggest cheat code in fantasy football. When I did my study last year, literally 50% of elite tight ends break out specifically in year 2. So this is always the band of players I'm targeting at the tight end position. This year, it's a little harder because a lot of rookie tight ends already had really good rookie seasons last year. So it's very hard our options are limited, essentially. We don't have that many tight ends who showed us a little, but not enough that they're not a top 5 dynasty tight end right now. So I'm going to go with Luke Musgrave. I would throw Tucker Kraft into this as well for some of the same reasons as Dontavian Wicks. There's not a clear number 1 wide receiver in this receiving core. I can close my eyes and imagine that Luke Musgrave is the number 2 target on this team this year. His yards per out run as a rookie was fine. He is highly athletic, which is very, very important for specifically only really tight ends. Ultra athleticism is very predictive of career fantasy points at the tight end position. I prefer Scott Barrett's Spork metric, where Musgrave is like 90th percentile plus. So Musgrave is my clear year 2 tight end target.
I love that. Again, they're both so cheap. I think you're picking which one you like the most and running with it. I think it's fine. I think we should all just be buying. I mentioned Daniel Bellinger last week, and they tried to laugh me out of the room, Ryan, but Daniel Bellinger is also super free, and that tight end room is also very ambiguous. So something to look into. I will say another tight end is Noah Fant. He may not be a rookie or a sophomore, but this team has moved to hopefully a more pass-friendly offense with who they brought in from Washington and an air it out type offense. And depending on how you feel about JSN in terms of tight ends that are hyper athletic, has the contracts, like they're locked in with him. He's also free at tight end 28 in round 18. He's also someone I'm taking a dart throw on. I got that after arguing with the guys from South Harmon who took me to school on Noah Fant. So I want to give them their flowers and shout them out as well.
Somebody kind of convinced me on Noah Fant too in my mentions the other day when I was tweeting about tight ends. I feel super bad. I don't remember who it was. It may have been Jared Smola. Someone laid out a really good argument for Noah Fant, and it basically what you just said. But yeah, I had also not really been woke to the Noah Fant thing before a couple days ago.
Yeah, he is someone that just has fatigue, right? Like I've felt the same way. So you want to talk about drafting for upside? That's one for me. Doesn't need a lot to have happen to have that David Njoku breakout. We also love Geno Smith here. So those two correlate really well. Let's talk about a quarterback that you're interested in that you think has untapped or undervalued potential right now in drafts that you think has a big upside possibility.
It's really hard to say anybody aside from Will Levis, who we've discussed extensively on this program. But I'll repeat it just for anyone that might not have caught the last several Dynasty Point shows, which is a big mistake. You should go back and watch them on the Fantasy Points YouTube channel. Also make sure you're subscribed when you go to do that. But anyways, Will Levis, look, anytime a quarterback who we at least think can be a mobile player in the NFL, wasn't that much last year, but had the mobility in college, could be unlocked with a new coaching staff this year. I get interested. Look, Jake Browning was like top 8 in fantasy points per dropback last year. If we're bringing the Bengals offense to Tennessee, or really any modern offense, but just specifically this one where the Titans are going out and investing in all of these pass catchers, investing at tackle, really building up this offense around Levis. And you tell me he's like the dynasty QB 20. Yeah, I want that. Sorry. It's really hard to find bets in a dynasty startup after like round 6 or round 7 where you can really close your eyes and imagine that they're going to be a top 2 round startup pick next year. And a young quarterback is basically the clearest archetype for that to happen with. So I want Levis specifically in dynasty. I don't know if I have a redraft take on him yet, but just the asymmetric upside is just really good for him in dynasty.
No, I agree. I think those are fantastic points. You don't have to convince me on Will Levis. We have been early on Will Levis. It's going to make some people moan and groan in our chat every time we talk about Will Levis, but you're right. We've already seen some upside with him. I don't think you're doing yourself too much harm. He is the type of player that you can draft at his spot and then draft Stafford just in case, or you can draft at a spot and draft Geno just in case, et cetera, and really kind of back yourself up and layer in that upside, which in and of itself is setting yourself up for upside, like drafting for upside, like we've wanted to talk about and have been talking about on this program. See how that all ties in together. There's one more player that I want to talk about in terms of quarterback upside that I don't think is getting really enough like we shit on him so much just because he's boring. Like he's Batman, he's white bread, he's boring, right? There doesn't seem to be much flash to him, but it's Derek Carr for me. He's not a young guy. Like I said, it's very hard to find quarterbacks that are rookies and sophomores that we don't already know about, but it's Derek Carr for me, who's still very cheap. Keep in mind, he was hurt a lot last year. This guy never doesn't like, he just finishes as a mid to high QB2 most years. It's just year after year after year. Talk about a contract for his dead cap money. Like even through 2025, their out is in 2026, where he has almost a $29 million dead cap. They on a cash strapped team, they need Carr on that team. Rattler is fine, but man, he's still just an uninspiring, I believe, fifth round pick. Keep in mind that in 4-point passing touchdown league, Carr outplayed Trevor Lawrence in the fantasy playoffs last year. The upside is there. As your QB2, that's all you can ask for. 20 points, 25 points. Yes, he had 16 points in week 17, but then you look at week 18 if you're an absolute degenerate and play in week 18 championships, which we advise you not to do. But he put up 30 when he started to get healthy, when that offense started to get healthy with him, Olave, etc. He's free in terms of what starting value he can bring as your third QB on your roster. I don't think there's a reason for him to be QB 31 and Spencer Rattler to be QB 35. I don't think that adds up to me. So I'm going to be in at his price for sure as a QB2 to QB3 on your team. If you want to punt the position, there is upside there. 100%.
Sorry, I'll just take any opportunity to make fun of Derek Carr. But
it's fine. Like he has a make funnable face. He has a very punchable face. The meme of him being angry on the sideline lives forever in my heart. But he's just at a price. Like it just gets to a point where we can make fun of him all we want. But if you're giving me QB 16, QB 15, QB 17, and his production year over year is not that far off from what you've been getting from Lawrence, but you're getting it 10 plus rounds cheaper, that's no brainer territory to me. He might be more expensive outside of leagues, but And trust me,
I mean, Derek Carr is a reason to draft Kendre Miller. We didn't talk about him in with the year two running backs, but Carr just absolutely loves checking the ball down. I posted a chart a couple of months ago basically showing that most QBs who do a lot of checkdowns, it's because they hold the ball for a long time and the check down becomes the only option they have. Maybe if you're Justin Fields or you're Russell Wilson, you're scrambling around a bunch, you end up having a check down. Nope. Derek Carr had a pretty fast time to throw, but also the fourth highest check down rate in the league. So this man is excited to check the ball down to Alvin Kamara. Anything happens to Kamara, that's potentially a Kendre Miller year two breakout waiting to happen. Just wanted to thread that needle for a second. Yeah. Yep.
That was the whole point of today's show, is talking about how to draft for upside and then drafting for upside and as much bonuses that we can get. This episode's not going to be an hour and a half. We have a great question asked by Brian Ford about how to navigate your drafts for startups and when you start making some changes. We didn't get to that today. I apologize. Because Ryan's a superstar. He does have a hard out here in a couple of minutes, so I'm going to try to speed up so he can get to the exits and outros and everything hype. So next week, we're going to hit that question. Hopefully the whole gang is back and answer your question from earlier, Brian. Yes, Lucas is on his honeymoon, still doing the rookie draft and making trades instead rookie draft, because Dynasty Points, we don't fuck around. We get the job done. We do what we have to do, and we try to do it in completely different ways. Ryan, quickly, where can people find what you're doing coming up?
Yep, you can find me on X at RyanJ_Heath. You can find all of my written content on FantasyPoints.com. Currently writing the statistically significant series where I take you through all of the most important stats in the Fantasy Points data suite, kind of break down what matters, what's predictive for fantasy football in the following season. I just released a really big article about weighted opportunity for running backs. Coming up, hopefully, going to be diving into catchable targets for wide receivers, just to give you kind of an idea of what I'm working on.
Yeah, statistically significant is must read. I don't read a lot of fantasy articles because I don't consume content the most efficiently that way, but that is an article that I'm keeping tabs on all off season, and you should be too. It is truly phenomenal. If you haven't already, please go like and subscribe the video. Subscribe if you haven't. We love everyone for helping us get to the 7K mark. We're marching to 10. That is the goal that we want to hit by the start of week 1. You got to get out of here. You have a ton of great stuff. My name is Thomas Tipple. You can find me at @LNostraThomas. You can get into the Discord where you'll find me the most, putting up exclusive content in there weekly. We're back next week. Again, like, subscribe, check in on our loved ones, even if you're not sure that they need it. Remember that clear eyes and full hearts can never lose in your best days. They're always spent tilting. Good night, everybody.
What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.